so much at stake, and when there's a real moment for entry into changing the conversation, a whisper is not enough. This movement has taught me that it's okay to get loud. And this is someone that I've been able to spend a lot of hours with for this movement, who's not so shy and who's really good at getting loud, Aaron Bugg.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at getting loud. I wasn't raised in a barn, but I was raised by a guy who was raised in a barn. My dad over there. I spent the past few years working as a very liberal deckhand. I learned working with them that despite our polarized political parties, we all struggled in the same way. When I wasn't working on the boat, I was traveling. And along the way, I met Aussies who made a living minimum wage. I met Danes graduating from college tuition free. I met Scots with universal health care. And I met Swedes who, instead of dehumanizing their prisoners, they rehabilitated them. Germans from eco-friendly cities. And as this list grew, I knew we didn't have to struggle here in America. And these friends of mine told me that their people achieved and kept these great successes by getting educated and engaged and making their demands loud and clear to elected officials at all. I agree with that. I think you guys know him. So if you guys could get loud for him. It's my pleasure to introduce to you, Paducah, the next President of the United States, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Let me thank Cass Vessert, let me thank Amy Eidings, and let me thank Aaron Bugg for those very, very generous introductions. Let me start talking, given the fact that this is a political meeting, I'll talk a little bit about politics. And then I want to get to something that actually interests me even more, and that is what is going on in this country and how, whether we're in Kentucky or whether we're in Vermont, we can make the kind of transformations that we need to make in order to make America the kind of country that you and I know we can become. Politically, we began this campaign a little bit over a year ago. And when we began, you know, many of the pundits said, well, Bernie combs his hair very nicely. And he's a GQ kind of guy. So when we began, we were 50, 60, 70 points behind in the polls behind. As of today, we have now won 19 state primaries and caucuses. Oregon also votes on Tuesday, and we hope to make it 21 in Oregon. Now, I will be very honest with you, is that for us to win the nomination, for us to win the number of pledged delegates that we need, pledged delegates being the delegates that are really elected by the people, to win those, we're going to have to do very, very well in the remaining 8 states. We're going to have to, right now we've won about 45.5% of the pledged delegates, but we're going to have to win about 65% of the remaining delegates in order to go into the Democratic Convention with a majority of pledged delegates. And that is why we need your help big time right here in Kentucky. And when we talk to the superdelegates, and what is interesting about this process, and I don't know how much you know about the process, it was kind of a strange process, because you got a whole lot of superdelegates who are part of the Democratic establishment. They would vote for Hillary Clinton before anybody else got into the race. Before the very first ballot was cast in the Democratic primary process. And what we are going to tell those superdelegates is that if they want the strongest candidate to defeat Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders is that candidate. And the reason is severalfold. Number one, if you look at all of the polling that is out there, in virtually every national poll and in every statewide poll, we do much better against Trump than does Secretary Clinton. And I'll give Trump by 5 points. And we're seeing that all, and we do very well with the independents. The other thing about this campaign that has been very gratifying, people, you know, for the young people here, as you get older, the definition's 45 years of age or younger. And why that is important, and I hope everybody takes note of that. This environmental justice, that is the future of America and the Democratic Party. Now, the reason I believe that our campaign has surprised a lot of folks in how well we are doing has a lot to do with the fact that we are treating the American people as intelligent people, and that we are doing something very radical in contemporary American politics. We're telling the truth. Now, the truth is not always pleasant. It's not pleasant in our personal lives. It is not pleasant necessarily in our national life. And very often there is a tendency to just push hard realities under the carpet. Why do I want to talk about these things? Let's just do a poll. Let's figure out what I can say to people and get some votes, tell some jokes, and I can win an election. But the truth is that today, the crises that we face as a nation in Kentucky, in my state of Vermont, and all over this country are so severe that we cannot push those realities aside. We're going to have to deal with them. And I believe that a nation as great as ours has the courage, can have the courage to address those issues and resolve them. And here are some of the realities that I think we have to deal with. I am the former chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. And I know that in Kentucky you have a proud military history, and I know you have many men in this country. But having talked to veterans from World War II through Iraq and Afghanistan as chairman of the Veterans Committee, you see the kinds of sacrifices that people have made, people coming home without arms or legs or eyesight, and of course so many not coming home at all. And they fought and they died to preserve our way of life. And the essence of our way of life is a democratic form of society. That's the essence. And what democracy is about is not a complicated vision. It means you have a vote, you have a vote, you have a vote, and you have a vote. One person, one vote. Democracy does not mean billionaires spending hundreds of millions of dollars to buy elections. Democracy does not mean Wall Street putting tens of millions of dollars into super PACs. We have to be honest about that. And as you all know, what oligarchy is about is a handful of wealthy families controlling the economic and political life of this nation. And if anybody here thinks that we are not moving in that direction, where a handful of billionaires and Wall Street and multinational corporations controlling the economic and political life of this nation, if you don't think that that is what is happening now, you are not paying attention. So what we are going to do together, number one, is we're going to overturn this disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United. And what Citizens United, as you know, says to the billionaire class, it says, hey, you guys already own the economy, you own much of America, now we will allow you to own the United States government. And I want to tell you, one of the leaders of that whole effort for Citizens United, and one of the guys who wants to go even further than Citizens United, is your own Senator Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell believes that Citizens United, which now allows for unlimited amount of independent expenditures, doesn't go far enough. He wants to see the day come when corporations and billionaires can buy politicians directly. And if that happens, we're moving. You all know what a NASCAR jacket looks like, where they have all the sponsors on it. Well, you're moving to the point, if Mitch gets his way, where senators will be wearing their suits saying, I am sponsored by ExxonMobil. Needless to say, we have got to do everything that we can to prevent this country from moving toward an oligarchy. We have got to revitalize American democracy. We have got to understand that people fought and died so that everybody in this country can help shape the future of our nation. But it is not just a corrupt campaign finance system that we have to take on. It is very much a rigged economy. This is what a rigged economy is. And you don't see this stuff on TV very often for obvious reasons. So let me just tell you what a rigged economy is. A rigged economy is when the top 1/10 of 1% of the people in our country today, not 1%, 1/10 of 1%, now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90% Americans. A rigged economy is when one family, the Walton family of Walmart, you are familiar with the Walton family. Walton family owns more wealth than the bottom 42% of the American people. You know, when we were kids and in school, we looked at countries. We had a handful of families controlling those countries. What do you think is going on in America when one family owns more wealth than the bottom 42%? And to add insult to injury, what you have in Walmarts right now, do we have anybody here who works at Walmarts? No, okay. What you have at Walmarts right now is the workers there are being paid wages that are so low. that many of those employees are forced to go on food stamps and Medicaid. Who is paying for those food stamps and Medicaid to help those workers? Congratulations on behalf of a family worth more than $120 billion. I want to thank you for helping to subsidize them. They are very grateful to you. But you see the absurdity of working families having to subsidize the wages of the wealthiest family in this country. So I say to the Walton family, get off of welfare, pay your workers a living wage. But it is not just a grotesque level of wealth inequality. Unfortunately, that redistribution has gone in the wrong direction. It has gone from the hands of the middle class and working families to the hands of the top 0.1% getting much richer. Middle class is shrinking. We got 47 million people living in poverty. Number two, when you look at America today, everybody knows there has been an explosion in technology and worker productivity. That means the average American worker is producing a lot more than he or she did 30 years ago. And yet, despite that, millions of workers in this country are working longer hours for lower wages. In my state, and I suspect it's not any different here in Kentucky, we got people who are working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, just to cobble together the income and the health care they need to take care of their families. Is that true here? Yeah. So how does it happen? Think about it. That with explosion of technology, which makes us more productive, people's incomes are going down, and we now work as a nation. American people work the longest hours of any people in the industrialized world. Japanese are very hard workers. We work longer hours than do the people in Japan. There are ads in newspapers for workers which do not include any paid vacation. Do you know that? There are people who have jobs with no vacation. Got a woman here who has that job. We have situations where mama's working, where dad's working, where the kids are working, where marriages struggle because of that stress, where kids are not getting the attention they need from their parents because dad and mom are both at work. Why? Why is it happening? And that's right. It is happening because the people on top want it all. Well, I got news for them. If together we make it to the White House, those days are over. We're going We are going to create an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. And I'll just tell you, if I may, briefly, you know, I've been going around the country, and you learn things as you go to different parts of the country. I was in Indiana a couple of weeks ago, talking to workers there. And these workers make furnaces, they make air conditioners. The company there, United Technology, a couple of years ago, paid its CEO, was not doing a good job, so they got rid of him. They gave him a severance package, and they say to them, sorry, we're shutting down our plants here, throwing 2,100 workers out on the street. We're going to Monterrey, Mexico, and we're going to pay workers there $3 an hour. I was in Atlantic City. He comes in and buys casinos. And he says to the workers, you're going to have to take a major cut in pay. We're going to have to take a major cut in your health care benefits. That's what's going on in Atlantic City. A couple of days ago, I was in South Dakota at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Anybody know Does anybody know what is going on in Pine Ridge? What is going on in Pine Ridge is the unemployment rate is totally off the charts. What is going on in Pine Ridge is the school system is failing the children. Drug addiction is rampant. Life expectancy, how long people live, is the equivalent of third world countries in South Dakota. I was in McDonald County in West Virginia, and what I learned there is that in that impoverished county in southern West Virginia, life expectancy is 18 years lower for men than it is in Fairfax, Virginia, 6 hours north. 18 years different. And that is true in sections of Kentucky as well. In other words, what we are seeing in inner cities, in Flint, Michigan, in rural white communities, what we're seeing on reservations is massive levels of poverty and misery that should not be taking place in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. So let me just tell you what I think together we have got to do to rebuild the American middle class. Number one, we have got to make certain that anybody in Kentucky, Vermont, or in America who works 40 hours a week is not living in poverty. That means we have to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. And that means we have got to end the absurdity of women today making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. That has nothing to do with economics. It has everything to do with sexism. And I know that the men in this room will stand with the women in the fight for pay equity. A darkness has encompassed the room. If somebody could, all right, okay. Now, when we talk about the economy, this is what happens. Every month, the federal government issues a report, and on the front pages of paper, there is the report that says official unemployment is about 5% nationally. Does anybody believe that real unemployment in America is 5%? Smart group of people. Because there is another report that comes out from the federal government which doesn't get quite the attention, which includes people who have given up looking for work and people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. And when you add those factors in, real unemployment is close to 10%. And then there are communities all over this country where real unemployment is much, much higher than that. In my view, we need to put the American people back to work. We need a massive federal jobs program, and I'll tell you the best way to do it. In my state of Vermont, we have roads that have so many potholes, people go over them, they disappear for weeks, and then we thaw them out in the springtime. We have bridges that are in massive disrepair, but it's obviously not just Vermont. It's all over this country. I was in Flint, Michigan a few months ago. You all know what goes on in Flint, Michigan? Children there are being poisoned by lead in the water. But it is not just Flint. Our levees and dams, our airports need massive amounts of work. We used to have in America the best rail system in the world. That is no longer the case. We need to rebuild our rail system. In fact, I was just in Bowling Green yesterday. And there was, you probably all know the location, there's a spot where there's an old railroad depot. And there was a railroad, an old railroad manufactured, I guess it was built in the early part of the 20th century in Louisville. Beautiful, beautiful train. We need to rebuild our rail system in America today. And when we do that, when we rebuild our infrastructure and make our country more productive, safer, more efficient, we can create 13 million decent paying jobs. So our mission is to say that in this great country, the middle class cannot continue to decline. We cannot continue to have the grotesque levels of income and wealth inequality that we need. And as a nation, we are going to have the courage to take on the billionaire class, Wall Street and corporate America, and say, our government, this country belong to all of us, not just to you. Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of how horrendous the current situation is. I'll give you one example. There is a Wall Street financial institution called Goldman Sachs. You all heard of it? It's a smart group of people here, okay? A month ago or so, Goldman Sachs reaches an agreement with the federal government for $5 billion, a settlement agreement. Why do they reach the settlement agreement? Because they were selling worthless packages of subprime mortgage loans, which contributed to the decline of our economy and making it the worst recession since the Great Depression, okay? And it's not just Goldman Sachs. Other banks were doing exactly the same thing. Paid $5 billion to help destroy this economy, get a police record. Zero. Not only do they not get a police record, a criminal record, they get significant increases in their compensation package. So we got news for our friends on Wall Street. Justice is going to come back to a broken criminal justice system. When we talk about a criminal justice system, this is another issue that we cannot sweep under the rug. Here are the facts. Today in America, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. Sure. We have 2.2 million people in jail. We're spending $80 billion a year to lock them up. Now, in order to address this issue, we're going to have to ask, what are some of the causes? Well, I'll tell you one of the causes. You go to communities around this country, in rural areas, in inner cities in this country, and you know what you're going to find? You're going to find youth unemployment, kids who have graduated high school, youth unemployment of 30, 40, 50%. And when kids hang out on street corners and have nothing constructive to do, bad things happen. And that is why I believe we should be investing. Think about an America where these kids are learning the skills they need to rebuild their communities, the affordable housing. When we talk about criminal justice, it is important that we talk about reforming local police departments. Do we have a health issue over here? Excuse me. All right, we got a medical. Okay, please.
Somebody, sir. They're on the way.
I think we have. Seizure.
We got EMTs outside.
Are they coming in? All right, we up. We have an EMT coming in right now. There they are. Okay. Okay.
People's president!
Well, what I was talking about is the need for criminal justice reform and looking at local police departments as well. I'm a former mayor in Burlington, Vermont, and we have worked with police officers all over this country. And the vast majority of police officers are honest, hardworking, and they have a very difficult job. But the culture has got to go out, and we have got to make it clear that, like any other public official, when a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. There are too many communities all over this country where people do not have the confidence they should in their police departments, and that has got to change. And the other thing that we have got to do is to demilitarize local police departments. We have got to make police departments reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. We have got to make sure that there is a culture out there that lethal force, killing somebody, is the last response, not the first response. We have got to end private ownership of prisons and detention centers. When you have private ownership of prisons, there is a perverse incentive to bring more people into jail when we want to lessen the number of people who are in jail. And here is an issue, and I'll be honest with you, I know it's controversial, but I'll tell you what I think. And that I think the time is long overdue for us to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Now, I know not everybody agrees with me, but let me tell you what I found. What I found is that over the last 30 years, the evidence is pretty clear, that millions of Americans have received criminal records for possession of marijuana. And I want you to think about it. You're a 19, 20-year-old kid going out applying for a job, and your prospective employer says, well, tell me about yourself. Ever been arrested? Well, yeah, I was arrested on marijuana. Okay, well, thank you very much. I got somebody else interested in the job. Also keep in mind, it is a racial issue in that while the white and black community do marijuana at about equal levels, 4 times as many blacks get arrested for doing marijuana as whites. That is why I believe that at a time when marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug, right alongside of heroin in the Federal Controlled Substance Act, we should be taking marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. Now, I know that this is, a controversial issue, not everybody will agree with me. Legalizing marijuana is done at the statewide level. 4 states and D.C. have done that. I think Oregon is going to vote on it soon, etc. But that's a state decision, but I don't think that possession should be a federal crime. But let me now, when we talk about drugs, let me get to a really, really difficult issue that I know is a very serious problem here in Kentucky, and it is a very serious... I was in Kentucky. I visited. My son and I just went through the state, your beautiful state, a couple of years ago. And we stopped into a school, and I won't mention the town. You would know the town, but I won't mention it. And I got to speak to some of the administrators there and some of the teachers. And the football coach says, you know what? This is how serious the problem is. 11 kids on my football team are no longer use the word homeless, but they're not homeless. They were just not living with their families anymore because their parents were strung out on opiates. 11 kids in a football team. This is a national problem, and the questions that we have got to ask ourselves is, A, what is the responsibility of the pharmaceutical industry, okay, in producing these drugs? What is the responsibility of doctors who are providing far too many of these drugs? But maybe most in problems there, and I asked the kids, why? And the kid says, nothing for us to do. It's, you know, that's not a great answer, but if you don't have a job, if school is not going well, if you don't have a future, I guess getting high in that context makes sense. But we are seeing lives being destroyed, people strung out, can't go to work, and bad situations become worse. Now, I don't think anyone has a magical solution to the problem, but I do say this. We are not... And that means, quite frankly, a revolution in mental health treatment in America. We need a mental health system which says that when somebody is in mental health crisis, when somebody wants to break an addiction, they should be able to get the care they need when they need it, not 6 months from now. People who say, I am worried to death about my brother. I'm worried whether he's going to commit suicide. I'm worried whether he's going to do something terrible. And we cannot find the mental health treatment we need, that we can afford. That has got to change, because it's not only addiction. You got thousands of people walking the streets of this country today who are suicidal or homicidal. They need help, and they need it today, not tomorrow. This campaign is listening to young people. And what young people are asking me is why it happens that when they do the right thing, they go out and get the best education they can, they end up $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 in debt. How many people here with student debt? Unbelievable. And this is the response I get to every rally that we do. There are millions of people with student debt. I think we approach this issue in two ways. Number one, first, we recognize that in the United States of America today, as a result of a changing economy, changing technology, and a very fierce global competitive economy, we need to have the best educated workforce. School degree, you were doing pretty well. You would be able to go out, get a decent job, and make it into the middle class. By and large, there are exceptions, but by and large, those days are over. People today need more education, need more training. And that is why I believe that in the year 2016, when we talk about public education, we must be talking about making public colleges and universities tuition free. Does that, let me ask you a question again. I'm asking people to think outside of the box. Does that sound, think about it, is that a radical idea? No! It really is not. The world has changed. Our educational system has got to change. People need more education. And when you have countries like Germany and Scandinavia doing it, and other countries, all right, it is time to learn that investing in our young people, making sure that all of our people in midlife who need more education to get a new job, that all of our people should have the opportunity to get the best education they need regardless of their income. Let me also say something equally important. I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money. My parents never went to college. I know that in Kentucky, Vermont, all over this country, you got kids in the 4th grade and the 6th grade. Their parents never went to college. They don't have any money. And the idea in their own minds that they will ever go to college is about as likely as going to the moon. It is not within their worldview. And these are the kids who drop out. These are the kids who get into trouble. I want every parent, every teacher, and every child in this country, in the 4th grade and the 6th grade in high school, to know that if you study hard, if you take school seriously, regardless of the income of your family, yes, you will be able to get a higher education. And that is revolutionary. Second of all, why don't you stand up, show the world your sign there. Well, that's one way of phrasing it. It's succinct. But here is the truth. Our income people, just exactly what we need. She left medical school, $300,000 in debt. We have a dental crisis in America. It's not a crisis school. She graduated $400,000 in debt. So her kid dropped out of college. These are just stories, millions of stories like this. Dropped out of college after 2 years, $60,000 in debt. Saw a guy in Nevada, took out a student loan 25 years ago. He is more in debt today than he was when he took it out. And he's worried that he's going to lose his Social Security benefits because he hasn't been able to pay off that debt. Frankly, that is all nuts. It's crazy. You know, it's like poisoning our water. It doesn't make any sense. I want everybody, this is not just me. Everybody understands how important education is. The door should be wide open to go out and get an education and not have to pay off your educational loans. Student debt, what we propose is allowing people with that debt to refinance their loans at the lowest interest rates they can find. I was in Elizabethtown just yesterday, and a young man came up. He was, as I recall, $75,000 in debt, and he said his interest rates were 12%. Now that's very high. Most people have lower interest rates. But when you can get interest rates to buy a car or to buy a home at 3 or 4%, you should not be paying 6, 8, 10, 12% on your student debt. Now, people say, well, Bernie, you know, you're a nice guy. You want to make public colleges and universities tuition free. You want to lower student debt. How are you going to pay for it? And let me tell you exactly how we're going to pay for it. This country bailed out Wall Street after their greed and recklessness and illegal behavior brought this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. I didn't vote for the bailout, but Wall Street got the bailout. It seems to be that now that Wall Street is doing ever so well, it is time to impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. And that one tax will bring in more than enough money to make public colleges and universities tuition free and lower substantially student debt. Let me touch on an issue that is not just of national concern, it is a global issue, and that is the following. I'm a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment. I have talked to scientists all over the world. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity, and climate change is already doing devastating harm in our country and around the world. That's just the facts. That is why I believe that we have a moral responsibility to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Very well, and I speak to you as perhaps the strongest pro-worker member of the United States Senate. I have a 98% pro-union, pro-worker voting record. And I'm proud to have been endorsed by many, many unions. I do understand that a transition away from fossil fuel, which has $41 billion in it to rebuild those communities who might be hurt through that transition. Our job is to save the planet, not hurt American workers, and that's what we're going to do. When we think about moving outside of the status quo, we have got to ask ourselves a very simple question. How does it happen that in the United States we are the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right? I voted for the Affordable Care Act, and the Affordable Care Act has done a number of things that are quite important. But 29 million Americans still have no health insurance. Many of you are underinsured with high deductibles and co-payments. Is that right? Yeah. And the drug companies are ripping off every person in this room and in this country. Drug companies charge us by far the highest prices in the world, and yet last year the top 5 drug companies made $50 billion in profit combined. In my view, we need to move toward a Medicare for all single-payer program. And by the way, if anybody in this room or in this state wants to know what kind of president I will be, take a look at Governor Bevin and what he is doing, and then think about the exact opposite, and that's Bernie Sanders. Governor Bevin wants to cut health care. I think health care is a right of all Americans. Governor Bevin wants to cut education. I want to expand educational opportunities in this country. My friends, I think all of you know that throughout the history of this country, real change, I mean real change, has never taken place from the top on down. Always from the bottom on up. You know, it's never about a president waking up in the morning and saying, oh, I've got a great idea. I think I'll sign a bill or propose a bill and we'll address this problem. That is not the way it happens. Think back 100+ years ago. Think back about the coal miners here in Kentucky who were being exploited ruthlessly. And with great courage and with great struggles that are known all over this country, they stood up and they said, we are human beings. We're not animals. We will be treated with dignity. We are going to form unions, United Mine Workers and others. And I am proud to have the support of many unions throughout this country because I believe it has been the trade union movement that has helped create the American middle class, and we thank them for that. And you think about the civil rights struggle, think about 100+ years ago, when racism and segregation and bigotry were rampant in this country, but extremely brave African Americans and their allies stood up, and they were beaten, they were jailed, some were killed, to say that in America, racism and bigotry will not continue. And what courage they showed. Women did not have the right to vote, did not have the right to get the education they wanted, did not have the right to do the job, not be second-class citizens. In that struggle. But that is how change takes place. To give you another example, in this country, person next to her would have said, no, you're wrong, it can't happen. It happened because the gay community and their straight allies, against tremendous levels of hostility, said loudly and clearly that in America people have the right to love each other regardless of their gender. And I want to give you one more, even more contemporary example in terms of how change takes place. If we were in this room 5 years ago, no time at all, somebody jumps up and says, you know, Bernie, the $7.25 an hour minimum wage is a starvation wage. We've got to raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour. I guarantee you that the person next to them would have said, $15 an hour? You are nuts. You want to more than double the minimum wage. Maybe $8, maybe $10, who knows? 15, you're too radical. You're thinking too big. But then what happened is workers in the fast food industry, workers in McDonald's, in Burger King, in Wendy's, they went out on strike and they said to the world, we cannot live on $7.25 an hour. And then what happened is they gained more and more support. Seattle, Washington passed legislation, $15 an hour. Los Angeles, San Francisco, $15 an hour. California, New York State, $15 an hour. And if I'm elected president, $15 an hour in every state in this country. What is my point? My point is that what today seems impossible, 20 years from now seems matter of fact. Okay? And people can't believe that it hadn't happened before. I mean, if you were to say to somebody, oh, I don't think women should vote, then people would think you're out of your mind. All right? 100 years ago, that was the reality. Small, not big. That you should not have the kinds of dreams that we should have in terms of what this country must become. And I have traveled all over this fantastic country, and the more I travel, the more I meet people, the more I am so proud to be an American. I have traveled all over this country, and what I am seeing now is people looking around them, and they're saying, wait a second, why do we have such a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality? It is not right that 58% of all new income created today is going to the top 1%. Why is it that the great middle class, once the envy of the entire world, continues to shrink and people are working longer hours for lower wages? Why is it that women are making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men? Why is it that kids cannot afford to go to college or are leaving school $50,000 in debt? Why is it that we are the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave? Why are we the nation that has 29 million people uninsured today, and yet we spend far more per person on health care than do the people of any other nation? Those are the questions that people are asking, and they're asking also, what kind of democracy do we have when billionaires are able to buy elections? Once we start asking to think outside of the box, our job now is to tell a handful of billionaires and folks on Wall Street that their incredible power over the economic and political life of this country is going to end. Our job is to create a political system which is vibrant and democratic, one person, one vote, to create an economy that works for all of us and not just a handful of wealthy campaign contributors. There is nothing that I have said to you this afternoon that is not supported by the vast majority of the American people, whether they are conservative or moderate or progressive. Yes, these ideas are opposed by the 1% and Wall Street, and I say, so what? Let me conclude by saying this. No president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. The powers that be are just too powerful. The only way we transform America is when millions of people come together, black and white and Latino and Asian American and Native American, gay and straight, men and women. When we come together as a people and fight for the rights of our children and our parents and for the working families of this country, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. That's what this campaign is about. Now, on Tuesday, there's going to be a very, very important Democratic primary here in Kentucky. What we have learned throughout this campaign is we do well when the voter turnout is high. We do not do well when the voter turnout is low. Let us see on Tuesday a record-breaking turnout at the Democratic primary. Our country. Thank you very much.